And what they want to do is they want to concentrate the Gazan population in camps, in concentration camps. And the reason that Benjamin Netanyahu is in power and has survived for so long, even though he was in the driver's seat on October 7th, is because his thinking about how to deal with the Palestinians is reflected in the larger population.
So recently, John Mearsheimer went on Judge Napolitano's podcast to detail the truth about Israel's occupation of Gaza, with the decision actually having been reached just days ago when Netanyahu himself said, not only will Gaza be annexed, we will move in and occupy it. Mearsheimer is one of the best political analysts that knows a lot about this situation, so let's get his viewpoint on it. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
Why is it that the Israelis can get away with anything?
Because of the power of the lobby in the United States. It's impossible, or has been up to now, impossible for any American president to really go after the Israelis and punish anybody for killing Americans because they pay a significant political price.
And does the lobby have this kind of power outside of the United States? Does it have power in France? Does it have power in Great Britain? Does it have power in Germany? Does it have power in Spain or Portugal or Italy?
I'd say yes to all those countries, and you definitely want to add Australia and Canada as well. You'd be shocked at how much power the lobby has in Australia and Canada. And if you have any doubts, or any of the viewers have any doubts about the power of the lobby in Britain, just take a look at what happened to Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Corbyn looked like he might be prime minister. He's very critical of Israel and wanted Britain to treat Israel like a normal country. And the lobby basically destroyed his political career.
Yeah, no question about that. If you want to learn more about Israel's stranglehold on European politics, read about ELNet. But ELNet is essentially the European flavor of AIPAC that we see in the United States, having people represent our elected officials, subjecting them to a filtration policy by which if you don't support whatever the Israeli government wants to do, you're primaried. Lots of money is thrown at you by challengers. We saw that with Corbyn. We saw that with people like Thomas Massey, who somehow got through $400,000 being spent on his congressional seat alone by AIPAC. But it's few and far between when it comes to politicians that can get through that. So AIPAC, yeah, they do have a stranglehold over politics, not only in the United States, but also in Europe. And we're learning more and more about that. And even more right-wingers are waking up to that fact now, with AIPAC essentially boasting how it has control over the voting patterns when it comes to issues related to Israel of something like 350 to 400 representatives.
How can this change?
I'm not sure. I don't have a good answer to that question at this point in time. The lobby is just so powerful. I mean, most people are reluctant to say that because you get accused of being an anti-Semite.
Right. Well, you've been accused of so many things, and you're so intellectually honest and so courageous. I'm sure it bounces off your back. I mean, just a few hours ago, Prime Minister Netanyahu announced his intention. I don't know if his so-called Security Council or Security Cabinet has voted on this yet, to use the IDF to occupy Gaza. This notwithstanding the persistent opposition of the head of the IDF, the three-star general that commands it, and notwithstanding what is probably the opposition of most Israelis. Can he get away with this militarily, or is this a disaster that he's walking into?
Well, I think that if the cabinet backs him up, which I would assume will happen, he can do it. He can execute it. The question you have to ask yourself is, do you think that he's going to succeed? I mean, what he's claiming he can do is finish off Hamas once and for all and pacify Gaza. I would argue, by the way, that his real goal is to finish the ethnic cleansing. But leaving that aside for the moment, do you believe that he can finish off Hamas? And you want to understand that on May 16th, they launched, they meaning the Israelis, launched this huge military operation in Gaza called Gideon's Chariots. And it just ended earlier this month, earlier in August. And it was a failure by all accounts. It was designed to do with what this new operation is designed to do, i.e. finish off Hamas. And they failed to do that.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And he's totally right about when it comes to maybe there's not a clear political solution to the stranglehold of power that Israel has on the United States and our government. But I think cultural changes are happening. You are seeing younger demographics especially shift away from this Israel first mentality. And you're even seeing it among right-wing populists. We saw this at Turning Point USA when people like Dave Smith and Tucker Carlson, when talking about this, that, hey, it's not anti-Semitic to criticize Israel and we should have no part in what they're doing in Gaza, that actually receiving applause from, diehard young Trump supporting conservatives that you didn't see before. The distant left is great on this. They've been great on this for so many years. The liberal establishment has not been great on this. But again, when it comes to younger people, it is shifting away from Israel. Now, will that manifest in political changes? Not immediately, but over time, I think it will. And I think Breitbart was right when he said that politics is downstream from culture. And when we see cultural phenomenon pan out like this, I don't think it's possible for the same to remain in place in our political system. He's right also that if you call it a genocide, you're going to be called an anti-Semite. They do that to Jewish critics of Israel too, like Glenn Greenwald and Dave Smith and Max Blumenthal and Jeffrey Sachs and Aaron Mate. The list goes on. And even Norm Finkelstein, the son of Holocaust survivors, they've called anti-Semitic for having that same viewpoint. So he's right. As far as whether this is going to be successful, who knows? Netanyahu is going to be able to do it. The cabinet, by and large, supports this. Israeli public sentiment generally supports this, that's for sure. There are dissidents in Israel that we often praise on this program, but they're not outweighing the criminal acts of their government, just like dissidents in the United States, like myself, doesn't exactly outweigh the criminal propensities of my own government. We'll have to see, what happens, but I don't think they're going to be able to wipe out Hamas, just for the same reasons why I don't think the U.S. was being able to wipe out terrorism just because it launched the war on terror, war on abstractions. That's not what the Israelis are going to get either.
And this is why the chief of staff of the IDF, and this general was handpicked recently by Netanyahu, is adamantly opposed to another offensive. It's why all sorts of security officials, ex-security officials who've occupied the highest positions inside the Israeli national security establishment are adamantly opposed to this operation. So there is huge opposition. That opposition is predicated on the assumption that it's going to fail. And lots of Israelis are going to get killed. Lots of Palestinians are going to get killed. And Israel's reputation, which is already in the toilet bowl, is going to be even worse off as a result of this operation.
Totally agree. And note that he points out there that even, some diehard Zionists that are part of this cabinet, part of this administration in Israel, they do oppose it, but not because they don't admire the goal of it necessarily, but because they think it will fail, just like Gideon's Chariots, which, is happening during a starvation campaign when, whistleblower Tony Aguilar is out there spilling the beans and exposing the war crimes that the IDF is committing out there. And it's sad, but if you listen to that Tucker interview, I don't think you can get through it without, watery eyes, because it's pretty pathetic. And Aguilar's a hero like Julian Assange and Edward Snowden, if you ask me, by the way.
So they're opposed. But can Netanyahu do it if he wants and he gets permission from the cabinet? The answer is yes.
Does he need permission from Donald Trump? Or does he give permission to Trump? Which way does permission flow between Netanyahu and Trump?
You're assuming he would ask permission. Why would he ask permission?
Yeah, you didn't even have to ask permission to launch a war against Iran, the country the U.S. was trying to secure diplomatic ties with for a new JCPOA. So what makes you think he's going to ask Trump's permission on this? There's no pushback from Trump. There's complete complicity and even pleading the case of Netanyahu and for the Knesset to drop corruption and fraud charges against him. So, of course, he doesn't need Trump's permission.
He doesn't need Donald Trump's permission.
Wow.
He does what he wants, and he understands full well that Donald Trump will back him. By the way, if you look at leaders all around the world, and this includes Western leaders, even in places like Germany, all of these leaders are very skittish about what is happening in Gaza. And they are putting pressure on the Israelis to put an end to this offensive in Gaza. And this includes the chancellor in Germany, right? But there is no evidence that President Trump is bothered at all by what is happening in Gaza. And there is no evidence that he is putting any pressure on Israel. So again, why would Prime Minister Netanyahu worry about what Donald Trump thinks about another offensive in Gaza when we've heard, or he's heard, hardly a peep from Trump in the past?
No kidding. He's totally right on this, from bombing Yemen for a month to, moving the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem, to signing the Abraham Accords, to, boasting about how pro-Israel he is, to pleading Netanyahu's case, to saying nothing about the genocide, to joining Netanyahu when it comes to attacking Iran. Trump has had the back of this Israeli genocidal regime from the start. And I hate to say it, but that is the truth. And, as a taxpayer, I feel the need to speak out on this because very few Americans are. A lot of people are in the independent media, but certainly doesn't get into the mainstream. And this is a topic of the utmost importance when it comes to U.S. foreign policy and just general morality and decency. How could you support this? Or how could the U.S. government support this when there's enough domestic problems to go around with inflation and high costs of food and housing and fuel? It just doesn't make sense in a world where we're $37 trillion in debt and the political methodology of the U.S. is mostly in the direction of Israel first. That's where we're at.
Trump was asked, would you support Israel reoccupying all of Gaza? And his answer, of course, is all over the place, but the bottom line is he doesn't know. Chris, cut number 5.
Would you support Israel reoccupying all of Gaza, as has been suggested by some Israeli officials?
Well, I don't know what the suggestion is. I know that we are there now trying to get people fed. As you know, $60 million was given by the United States fairly recently to supply food, and a lot of food, frankly, for the people of Gaza that are obviously not doing too well with the food. And I know Israel is going to help us with that in terms of distribution and also money. We also have the Arab states are going to help us with that in terms of the money and possibly distribution. So that's what I'm focused on. As far as the rest of it, I really can't say. That's going to be pretty much up to Israel. Yeah, please.
You can ignore every part of that except for the last sentence. It's going to be up to Israel. He's not going to do anything about it. He's not even answering one way or the other clearly. He's just talking about aid to Gaza, which, by the way, Israel's not going to help with. They've reduced aid stations from 400 to 4, encouraging stampedes, and the IDF is firing upon Palestinians waiting in lines for food. And they're not giving water out, too, by the way, even though the food that they give out requires water for its preparation. Anthony Aguilar talked about this. But you can say there, this was an evasive answer, but everything can really be ignored except for the last part. It's going to be up to Israel. Yeah, it is. You don't have to say. You don't say.
Catch up to Israel. He doesn't know what he's talking about with the food. The organization he's talking about is run by Mossad. According to Max Blumenthal and Aaron Mate, they have reduced 400 food distribution centers to 3 or 4. That's what the United States is paying for, and he wants to be thanked. He wants to be thanked for that.
But just let me say, his answer mirror images what I said. He said it's up to Israel,
Yes,
Right.
whether or not they occupy Gaza, and that's exactly what you'd expect from him. And of course, he's focusing on the food situation because that's what has people all around the world, including West European leaders, up in arms. And again, he is the only leader who's not up in arms. He's doing a bit to sort of ameliorate the problem because he doesn't like the criticism that's being directed at him.
Here he is. Yesterday, you said many times that you want to stop wars in the Middle East. Watch his answer, cut number 14.
You said many times that you want to stop wars in the Middle East. Now Prime Minister Netanyahu is contemplating reoccupying Gaza entirely. Is he defying you, sir, or are you giving him a green light?
Well, we have stopped wars in the Middle East by stopping Iran from having a nuclear weapon, and they're they can say they're going to start all over again, but that's a very dangerous thing for them to do because we'll be back. As soon as they start, we'll be back.
Just imagine that. He stopped the war in Iran. No, he started with Israel a new war in Iran. And now, rather than before, they're encouraged to seek out and fast track a nuclear weapon when they didn't have one before. When Tulsi Gabbard said in her annual threat summary they didn't have one and they hadn't reconstituted their program, and you shelved U.S. interests to do that. You just completely annihilated the America First mentality of negotiating with Iran for the sake of Netanyahu. No, you started that war, just as you exacerbated wars in both Syria and Yemen in your first term, ramped up the bombing with Afghanistan for part of that, and are ramping up the war in Somalia right now, which almost no one talks about, almost gets no attention. So no, he hasn't shown a propensity to end wars, and he hasn't shown an inclination whatsoever to criticize what's going on in Gaza and threaten to withhold money like you really ostensibly could if you're if you're the benefactor of $20 billion to Israel last year. You would think that that would require you to have some amount of leverage over the policy of that country when you're subsidizing their security, which is really subsidizing their genocide, but he doesn't even try.
Your colleague, Professor Postal at MIT, says they have a nuclear weapon already, that Trump doesn't know what he's talking about. Of course, he dodged the question whether or not he supports Israel occupying Gaza. Suppose Netanyahu requests American troops on the ground in Gaza, not to help feed the Palestinians, but to help kill them. What will Trump do?
That I think he would resist. I find it hard to imagine him doing that. And I actually find it hard to imagine Netanyahu asking Trump to do that. I would imagine that Netanyahu fears that the United States will get deeply involved in Gaza, especially in terms of feeding the local population. And that'll make it much more difficult for Netanyahu then to cleanse Gaza or to control it the way he would like. I mean, what they want to do, what the Israelis want to do now, is that they want to create concentration camps in Gaza. Gaza, as you know, before October 7th was one giant concentration camp, but they're now occupying huge chunks of Gaza.
And before you say this is a conspiracy theory, high-ranking officials in the Israeli government have talked about creating concentration zones. Israel Katz in particular saying where the ruins where Rafah once stood is going to be one such concentration zone where they want to move 600,000 Palestinians into. They use terms like relocation and transfer, but those, have alarming allusions of the Holocaust and Nazi Germany's atrocities. And how ironic is it when, you get accused of being anti-Semitic when these policies that Israel is launching seems to, do everything under the sun to expand anti-Semitism if you've gotten people to believe that your country is indistinguishable from Judaism as a whole, which they have convinced a lot of people of that, including American politicians. So, yeah, this isn't a conspiracy theory. Read especially what Israel Katz has talked about in relation to this, and also some others in the Israeli government, including Imitar Ben-Gvir. So, yeah, this is not a conspiracy theory. They are planning to set up concentration zones, and, I just don't think you can look the other way at that. This is, palpably genocidal, and there's no way around it. There's no excuse for it, no matter how much propaganda they try to say. And I'm just going to anticipate the propaganda for this round. It's going to be that Hamas is the one setting up the concentration camps. That's what they're going to go with.
Well over 50% of the territory. And what they want to do is they want to concentrate the Gazan population in camps, in concentration camps. I mean, really what they wanted to do, or at least what Netanyahu wanted to do, was he wanted to put them in death camps. You understand, in Europe during the Holocaust, there was a difference between concentration camps and death camps. Death camps were where you took Jews and others to be murdered outright. Concentration camps, a lot of death certainly took place in those concentration camps, but they were different than death camps. And what the Israelis initially wanted to do was turn those camps in Gaza into death camps. They wanted to starve the Palestinians to death, right? Or kill them from the air. And that's what they were doing. That's why the world is up in arms, because all of those people were dying and were on the verge of a famine.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, this is inescapable. You can see what Netanyahu said immediately after October 7th when he said, those people are Amalek. They're, essentially barbarians that aren't worth living. And, we need to have retribution against Amalek. They were the descendants of Esau in the Old Testament. And even there's been pushback from some former prime ministers in Israel, like Ehud Olmert, who has criticized them for wanting to set up these concentration camps. So again, this isn't conspiracy theory. I know some people watching this will think that, but take a look at the primary sources. Take a look at what Katz has said about this and responses from people like Yair Golan and Ehud Olmert. This is what they're doing on the bankroll of the U.S.
So you can't do that anymore. No more death camps. So what you got to do is you go to concentration camps. And what you do is you put people in small pieces of territory, and you give them enough food and water and medicine to survive. But they live like animals inside these concentration camps. And
why can there be no more death camps? What would stop Netanyahu? Who would stop Netanyahu?
I think that world opinion turned so completely on Israel in recent weeks that the Israelis have been forced to back off. The Israelis and most of their supporters in the United States have been forced to back off. And they're now talking about allowing food and medicine and water into Gaza.
Yeah, obviously world opinion had turned on Israel long before this, months into this genocide, not 22 months away. You are seeing U.S. opinion turn against it more hard right now. I think that plays into it. So I think I mostly agree with Mearsheimer. Much of the opinion had already turned, but you can see that just explode in recent weeks. The amount of problems and how this is being talked about in even American politics more. And, Congress is totally tone deaf to this. They've spent their congressional recess taking photo ops with Netanyahu right now, going to Jerusalem and, continuing the propaganda behind this and, continuing with, hey, Israel has the right to defend itself. Hey, this is Hamas's genocide. It's Hamas's fault. They get to terrorize the world for 8 decades, say, just because of Hamas. And they'll call innocent babies Hamas. The same kind of propaganda has run through all this.
But that's it. They're not talking about rebuilding Gaza. They're not talking about Palestinian self-determination. Because again, you have to understand that the goal here is to ethnically cleanse Gaza.
Right.
And by the way, as many of your guests have pointed out on this show, ethnically cleansing Gaza enjoys widespread support inside of Israel. We in the West like to portray Netanyahu as an outlier. And the argument is, if you only get rid of Netanyahu and you replace him with another more reasonable leader, all these problems will go away. This is ridiculous. The political center of gravity in Israel is far to the right. It's extremely hostile to the Palestinians. And the reason that Benjamin Netanyahu is in power and has survived for so long, even though he was in the driver's seat on October 7th, is because his thinking about how to deal with the Palestinians is reflected in the larger population.
Wow, what a great point. I think Mearsheimer made several very, great points in this video, but the last one might have been the best because, there's this mentality amongst some that Netanyahu is the only problem here. He's the root of all the problems going on in Israel. And if he's just replaced, then we'll get a more favorable regime when it comes to peace and laying off the poor, beleaguered, emaciated, dead Palestinians. But no, this is a mentality pervasive in Israel, this right-wing Greater Israel Project obsessed horde of Likudniks that won't go away just by replacing Netanyahu, just as, hey, the Israel lobby's influence and power in the United States won't go away just by replacing, say Biden with Trump. It can be worse in some cases. If you put Ben-Gvir in that seat, I think it might even be worse. I think if you put Israel Katz in the seat occupied by Netanyahu, I think it might be worse. So he's exactly right about that. Netanyahu is not the only problem. He is a supervillain, don't get me wrong, but this thirst for expansion and genocide and death and destruction and starvation isn't limited to Netanyahu himself. It's not only his enablers, but also members of his government that is holding significant power and influence over public opinion in Israel. It might be something like 80-20, but that is true. And that's not to condemn all of the Israelis. There are Israeli dissidents that look on this in horror. I named some of them earlier in this video, Yair Golan and Ehud Olmert. I disagree with them a lot when it comes to policy. If they were, a U.S. politician talking about domestic policy, I would debate them endlessly on some of those things and have sincere problems about that. But they are right when it comes to Netanyahu and his ilk's reckless attitude toward Gaza. So yeah, they're going to move in, they're going to occupy. The United States isn't going to push back. The only question is, how successful really will they be at eliminating Hamas when so many of those dead children, dead babies, have sisters and brothers and uncles and fathers that will now be willing to join terrorist organizations, if not Hamas, Hezbollah, or a different organization for the first time? I think that will be a tangible effect of all this, if it isn't already. I think it is already. But, this is not going to go away in the methodology that Israel thinks it's going to, just by the brute force and the sword and hurling that and pointing that toward Gaza. I don't think this is going to go away that way, but I do want to hear from you on it. Do you agree with Mearsheimer? What is the end result of Israel's occupation of Gaza going to be? Are they going to be successful? Is there a tipping point at which Israel is not going to be able to keep this going? Let me know in the comments below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to Napolitano too. He's awesome. Really recommend him and his channel. And please consider becoming a YouTube member. If you click the join button below, you can support the channel, which I'll really appreciate. And as thanks for that, I'll give you access to all my videos before they go live to the general public on my channel. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Have a good one.